Thank you, Lynn. Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Tonight, we're hosting Dr. John Calder, whom I've had the honor of knowing since I was about 10 or 11 years old. So I've heard a lot of John's talks, and he was very instrumental in my getting into geology as a student in high school and still today. John's had a long and illustrious career at the Nova Scotia Department of Natural Resources as a geologist, starting in 1977, and recently retired this year and now is able to pursue other geoheritage ventures. John is also a part-time faculty member at St. Mary's University. He's published a number of scientific papers over the years and a couple of very popular books, including Coal Age Galapagos on the Joggins Fossil Site, Island at the Center of the World on PEI Geology and Culture, and was the senior author of the Joggins Fossil Cliffs UNESCO World Heritage Site nomination, which was successful and inscribed into the UNESCO World Heritage Family in 2008. More recently, John has been getting involved in geoheritage, although his geoheritage involvement follows his entire career. He's now the chair of the Canadian Geoparks Network and has been deeply involved in the creation of the Nova Scotia's newly declared Cliffs of Fundy UNESCO Global Geopark, which I'm sure we'll hear lots about tonight. So welcome, John, and look forward to your talk.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you, Lynn, and thank you, Dave, for hosting. And thank you all for joining here. I miss seeing your faces and having a chat afterwards and face-to-face like we all do, but we're all in this boat together. So it's great to be here. What I wanted to do today is to share with you a little about, you've heard a lot about UNESCO Global Geoparks of late. We had 2 new ones in Atlantic Canada announced this year. And so I wanted to tell you a little bit about our Canadian Global Geoparks, what UNESCO Global Geoparks are, what they're not, and take you on a little bit of a virtual tour of our 2 newest geoparks, Discovery in the Bonavista Vista Peninsula area of Newfoundland, and Cliffs of Fundy on the north shore of the Mines Basin on the Bay of Fundy. So away we go. And the first thing that I do want to say is Walalin, thanks to various people. But before I get started, I just want to acknowledge that I am giving this talk to you from Mi'kmaq, the unceded land of the Mi'kmaq people. I'd like to thank specifically Gerald Glode, Dr. Don Julian, and Elders Advisory Council of the Confederacy of Mainland Mi'kmaq, colleagues of the Canadian Geoparks Network and CC UNESCO, compatriots in Canada's geoparks, and in particular at Discovery and Cliffs of Fundy. And also to all my friends in the Atlantic Geoscience Society, the AGS as we lovingly call it, and the Travelling Speaker Series. I also want to thank Amanda McCollum for the use of some of the slides on Discovery Geopark. So here's a little snapshot of geoparks in Canada. Let's look at that. Look at that fantastic scenery, the fantastic geology, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. It is not even the tip of the iceberg. You know, when you think of Canada and our fantastic geology, let alone Atlantic Canada and the riches we have here to share. So I can confidently say we're going to see a lot more global geoparks in Canada. This is Tumbler Ridge on the top left in BC, Stonehammer, the first geopark in North America in the St. John area of New Brunswick, Cliffs of Fundy in the middle, Discovery, Bonavista Vista Peninsula area in Newfoundland, and Percé on the Gaspé Peninsula of Quebec. This is a map of our geoparks in Canada. The geoparks in purple are now designated UNESCO Global Geoparks. The ones in red are aspiring geoparks. In other words, they're working towards getting their ducks in a row to first go to the Canadian Geoparks Network to be vetted, and then to submit their application to UNESCO and go through the rigors of evaluation to become UNESCO Geopark. Some of these I'll point out to you. There's Tumbler Ridge, Stoner, Percé, Cliffs of Fundy are one of our new ones, and also Discovery, Bonavista. Sea to Sky is one of our newest aspiring geoparks in the Whistler area of British Columbia, and they're going very enthusiastically forward. Also, Oniakara in the Niagara Escarpment area, southernmost area of Canada, is very, very well along as well. And others are working very hard. So we expect that these will be developed and soon be applying and going through the rigors of assessment. Just a little snapshot about geoparks in Canada. I mentioned that Stonehammer was our first. It was actually the first in all of North America, in Canada, States, and Mexico in 2010. And in 10 short years, Canada has now grown to 5 UNESCO Global Geoparks in only 10 years. It seems like a lot longer than that. And 5 more aspiring geoparks are working currently toward developing their applications. Obviously, the COVID pandemic has played havoc with some of these aspiring geoparks and with established ones, and some of them, though, have actually benefited. I just wanted to, these are a few facts that I shared with the world at a Global Geoparks Network virtual forum with people from all around the world just last month. And I just wanted to give people an idea of the size of Canada, that the distance from Tumbler Ridge in the west to Discovery in the east is 6,000 kilometers. Just think of that. It's really quite mind-boggling. I also wanted to point out that Canada has approximately the same land area as Europe and China, but Europe has 75 UNESCO Global Geoparks and China alone has 41. So 5 is certainly not many. This is a lot of text that was also presented to the world recently when I was giving an overview of what's going on in Canada. I just wanted to mention that the Canadian Geoparks Network works very closely with the Canadian Commission for UNESCO in Ottawa. They are funding some of our branding, communication strategies, strategic planning, and they were really instrumental in getting the news out with our 2 new geoparks this summer. And it was really, really helpful because of the pandemic and whatnot. And it really generated a lot of excitement. Important, really important to the Canadian Geoparks Network and to CC UNESCO is reconciliation with Canada's Indigenous peoples. And making their role in Canadian Geoparks more than just a token, making it meaningful. This is of paramount importance to us. And we're in a position to advance this goal worldwide. The Canadian Geoparks Network is working to ensure that its newest geoparks and its oldest examples of best practice around the world. This is an image, a group shot from a meeting that we had in Tumbler Ridge Global Geopark in January of a year ago. And it was wonderful, even though it was in a pretty snowy area and remote area of Canada. The nearest Tim Hortons is something like 160 kilometers away. That gives you an idea. So but I just wanted to point out a few of the people in this group. On the far left, this is Sarah Bain, an Indigenous representative, real crackerjack and very smart. This is Jeff Hunston from the Yukon. In the back, this is in the black, is on the left is Gail Brenner, who used to be the executive director of Stonehammer and was very influential. This is behind her is Ellie Hayne-Bennett. Dr. Hayne-Bennett is the science representative for the Canadian Commission for UNESCO. Beside me in the back, right under the Tumbler Ridge sign, is Sarah Gamble, who was at the time the executive director of Tumbler Ridge and now is looking at the possibility of of an aspiring geopark on Vancouver Island. Godfrey Nolan over here was really the father of geoparks in Canada. He, for 10 years, was the chair of our Canadian National Committee before we became a not-for-profit network. Beside him was Renaud Camarand, who was the executive director of Per Se, and beside him, the last gent in the back on the right is Pierre Verpelst, retired from the Quebec Geological Survey and very instrumental in working with aspiring geoparks. Many of the gentlemen in the front and ladies in the front are Indigenous representatives that participate in the Tumbler Ridge Advisory Council for Indigenous peoples. Tumbler Ridge is walking the walk when it comes to involvement of Indigenous people, and are really to be respected for that. So what is a global geopark anyway? Well, first of all, it's not a park. So I don't know the name, but we always have to start with that point. Not in the Canadian sense anyway. It was a park in the European sense, which is not an exception, which they tend to be in North America. A geopark has boundaries on a map, but they are not legal boundaries. In other words, there's no change in rules or property rights or ownership as you cross a boundary. But there are expectations. Once you cross into a geopark, you should expect to have the geological heritage of that area laid out for you or available. You should have great experiences awaiting when you go into the geopark. UNESCO has no legislative authority in a country. There's a lot of conspiracy theories about blue helmets and whatnot, but they have no legislative authority. They have no power to override local legislation or to enact laws anywhere in the world. It does, however, have rules for becoming and staying a UNESCO Global Geopark. They have the right to dots if you are to become a UNESCO Global Geopark. There are certain expectations. So here's the formal definition of a geopark. It has evolved since it became a UNESCO phenomenon. I'll mention that in a moment. So you can read it yourself, but I'll read it for you in case you're having trouble with the screen. UNESCO Global Geoparks are single unified geographical areas where sites and landscapes of international geological significance are managed with a holistic concept of protection, education, and sustainable development. Embedded in this is that they are to be community-led, inclusive of culture, and vehicles for sustainable economic development, as referenced already. So they're bottom up as opposed to top down, although that may change in other countries depending on their political culture, I'm sure. They are inclusive of culture. You are admonished if you do not include culture, and if you do not show how the culture of an area, the arts, the music, the food, the oral culture is linked to the land, to the geology. And this is a wonderful aspect of global geoparks. And of course, to me, the main reason is sustainable economic development, and truly sustainable. So the word sustainable is so misused and overused these days. But in this case, truly sustainable economic development, especially for rural areas, which are really challenged to come up with new ways of staying afloat, basically. So I wanted to mention this new requirement of international significance. So this is one of our two newest geoparks, Discovery in Newfoundland. Their claim in the international significance realm is the rise of animal life. Now, they have fossils that represent the history of life on Earth. Specifically, they have exceptionally preserved Ediacaran. Now, we're not even sure if they're plants or animals. These things are so strange. There are about 20 different species, genera, etc. present. They existed from 635 to 541 million years ago. They are the most complex, the oldest complex multicellular life forms on Earth. So the ones that are found in eastern Newfoundland, including Mistaken Point, which is the site of a World Heritage Site in the southern Avalon Peninsula, are the oldest recorded. They're preserved under fine layers of volcanic ash, forming subtle imprints on rock surfaces. One of the real claims to fame is this Heutia quadriformis, pictured on the right of your slide, and this strange looking creature, because it may represent the first fossilized evidence of muscular tissue. In other words, it may be the oldest known animal, multicellular animal on Earth at 560 million years of age. The cliffs of Fundy, this is straight out of our application document, so forgive the small text. The highest tides on Earth actually occur in the geopark. Now, they stretch from Economy Point across to Burnt Coat Head. And I would here give to Burnt Coat Head in Hants County, where they have a phenomenal interpretive center, guided, a great access to the beach. But the line of the highest tides, of course, is not a point. It's a line that stretches from Burnt Coat Head across to Economy. So we can make that claim. Also, we have one of the best places on Earth, if not the best place on Earth, to actually witness where a supercontinent called Pangaea came together and then broke apart again about 100 million years later. Attending that breakup was the largest outpouring of lava in Earth history. And that lava is now cooled and formed a rock called basalt, which you can see on the photo on the left, the dark rock atop the reddish rocks, which were the sedimentary rocks of a rift valley, sand dunes, river deposits, etc. That largest outpouring of lava in Earth history gave rise, well, it really is the smoking gun for the fourth mass extinction in the history of life on Earth. Wiped out the competitors of the dinosaurs and allowed the dinosaurs to take full reign at the top of as apex predators and animals of the Mesozoic era for 135 million years. Just think, humans have only been around, even in the most feeble excuse of a human, for 3 million. 135 million, so we do owe dinosaurs a little bit more respect, perhaps. Also, we have the oldest known site in Northeast North America of indigenous people, of humans, period, at Mi'kmaq de Burgh. We have a classic textbook example of an ancient rift valley. People come from around the world to examine the record of this rift valley that formed during the early days of the dinosaurs. We also have the earliest mineral exploration, and I'm going to go back to this point. This is a really important one that shows you how science moves quickly, sometimes slowly, but sometimes quickly. The earliest mineral exploration by Europeans in the early 17th century. That's at Cape d'Or, where copper was not discovered by Samuel de Champlain in 1603, but was revealed to him by the Mi'kmaq. Now, remember this story. I'm going to come back to that with some new exciting insights. So how do geoparks differ from World Heritage Sites? The Joggins Fossil Cliffs World Heritage Site, just north of the Cliffs of Fundy, and to the south of Bonavista, we have the Mistaken Point UNESCO World Heritage Site as well. Well, first of all, global geoparks were adopted but not conceived, and I don't know if there's any entendre there, but it's true, they were adopted but not conceived by UNESCO. This reflects that they are different, that they are community driven, and that they have a sustainable economic development focus, unlike any other UNESCO program. The World Heritage Sites have a stronger focus on being unique the most outstanding example in the world. World Heritage Sites have much stronger focus on integrity. That's a word that UNESCO uses, which translates to protection. Geoparks focus on partnerships with other geoparks. It's a big part of being in the Global Geopark family. Around the world, how did geoparks come about? Well, European geoparks were born in 2000. And this explains why there's more in Europe than anywhere else. In 2004, China really liked their model and they joined Europe in 2004, and Global Geoparks were born, even though at the time it was very Eurocentric and China-centric. In November 2015, just 5 years ago, Global Geoparks were adopted officially as a UNESCO. As of 2020, there are 161 global geoparks in 44 countries around the world. That's a big jump in 20 years from nothing, or the first, to 161 in 40 countries and growing. There's particularly strong growth in Latin America, Mexico, and countries south, as well as the Caribbean. GeoLac is their association name. Africa now have two, the Ngorongoro crater in East Africa and Magoun Geopark in Morocco. Russia has just had its first, and Australia is close behind. So it is becoming, there are many geoparks in Southeast Asia and Asia generally. So back to our geoparks in Canada. Just wanted to mention, although I'm going to focus on our two new ones, with all the buzzes about and the excitement, close to Fundy and Discovery, I want to point out our other geoparks briefly in Atlantic Canada. Now, per se, we're going to adopt you. Gaspésie is, yes, it's part of Quebec and not usually called the Atlantic provinces, but it borders on the Atlantic Ocean, so per se, you're in. So I'm just going to take you briefly through these 4 geoparks. They are from south to north: Stonehammer, Cliffs of Fundy, Percé, Discovery. Stonehammer, our oldest geopark, our first. They were groundbreakers, pioneers, still working diligently to be to raise the bar at their geopark. That initially the only one, not much to compare in North America, but they're really working very diligently to actually come up with new and exciting ways of being a geopark. So look for good things to happen in the future, and this in particular coming up in the next year from Stonehammer. I also want to point out that with a geopark, they're not the exclusive domain of geologists and researchers, but they are where geological research happens. And in this case, as in many cases when it comes to fossils and paleontological discoveries, just 2 days ago, this announcement was made, and there you are, Matt, on Matt's Facebook page, sharing this news of a major discovery of fossil footprints in Stonehammer UNESCO Global Geopark. But the important thing is, it was made by residents of the geopark. They're the ones who made the discovery. And it's a testament, and hats off, Matt, to you for giving them their due, for treating them with respect, and look at the fantastic discovery. This also has implications for the age of the rocks. I won't get into it, steal any of Matt's thunder here, but it's a very important discovery, just fresh off the press. Okay, let's buzz up to Geopark de Percé. And I was lucky to be an evaluator of Percé along with Pierre Verpelst when they put their proposal together of Canadian Geopark Network, and at that time the National Committee. And so we went through, we advised them, we helped them. We sort of give a dry run of an evaluation by UNESCO. And I just wanted to hats off. It's a small, compact area. It's one of the smallest geoparks, but boy, does it have a lot going for it. This platform, this viewing platform, was their idea. With it, it did not exist when Pierre and I were there. And I was frankly skeptical, but it has become wildly popular as a wonderful viewing platform. And just down at the bottom in the red that you can see poking out through the trees is a fantastic new facility. It is imaginative, an audiovisual experience and a playground for kids, all with thinking outside the box artistically. It's called Tectonique. This is part of the three-dimensional virtual display. They have just an unbelievable experience there. And there's a very strong credit and acknowledgement of Glooscap and the Mi'kmaq traditions as well, which is wonderful. Very proud of our Global Geoparks to be meaningfully respecting and engaging our Indigenous colleagues and friends. What a group. So this is just a small group. There's Pierre in the pink shirt and me in the back with mop. These are some of the key people. Right in the front with the blue top and the long skirt is now the mayor of Per Se. You know, she was the chair at the time of the Geopark. But I just wanted to tell you why things are so exciting in Per Se, I believe, is because of the way they came about. Now, we talked about geoparks being community driven. Well, this geopark started off with 25 entrepreneurs in the community. This is a small rural community. And they came together and they each put forward money to leverage more money from the government and other funders. They put their own money on the line to do this. Now that's talking about believing in something. And I think that ingenuity and entrepreneurship really shines through at Per Se. So I really recommend going up and taking Per Se in. Okay, so now on to our two new geoparks and to introduce you to them. So Discovery in the eastern part of Newfoundland is, here's a few snapshots. It's in the Bonavista Peninsula area of eastern Newfoundland, north of St. John's. It has an area of about 1,150 square kilometers, covering 280 kilometers of coastline. There are 27 communities, 7 of which are incorporated municipalities, and about 8,000 inhabitants. Here on the little map on the bottom right, you can see the various communities that are involved, and the ones that are in particular. I'm just going to move my viewing window here. So from Tickle Cove, Keels, Kings Cove, Bonavista itself, Elliston, Little Catalina, Catalina and Port Union are some of the, and also Port Rexton. These are some of the key areas, but also Trinity. So most of these communities have a dedicated geosite that they're stewards of, which is pretty a really novel and exciting way to go. These are some images of that I took. Actually, I've been to Bonavista 3 times. First on a field trip with the Geological Association of Canada, then twice on evaluation missions, and they worked for a very long time. And you just know that it meant a lot to the communities because they stuck with it for a long, long time to make this happen. Up on the left, we see the dramatic cliffs that drop off at Kings Cove. And on the right, Elliston, that's Randy Miller in the blue on the back. retired from the Brunswick Museum. I used to be the geoscientist at Stonehammer. And trying to make our way across, these are the puffin nesting sites, these cliffs at Elliston. And we're making our way across. This is one of my favorite sites at Discovery. It's also at King's Cove, but it's these multicolored rainbow-like layers of rocks that are just beautiful. They're as beautiful as anything in the painted desert of the Midwest of the US. But here we have ocean crashing in as well. Don't have that in the Midwest. So that's another of the spectacular geosites in Discovery. I want to pause on this one because these are unique and they have a special message. These are the root cellars of Elliston. So Elliston both has the puffin nesting cliffs, but they also have these root cellars. And they're built into the ground, into glacial deposits, and they are shored up on the front with local building stones that are natural flagstones, and they're mortared, a door in. These were used to store vegetables in the days before refrigeration. And they dot the countryside at Elliston. It's kind of funny because they call themselves the root cellar capital of the world. And as far as I know, nobody has contested that. So, but this is interesting. So some people debate, is this a geosite? It is to me. It is a linking of geology and culture. It's a perfect example of how we link geology with culture. Now you may call it a geocultural site, a cultural geosite. It doesn't matter. The important thing is it links in areas, geology and culture, how intimately we are related to the land. And it's borne out here in these Elliston root cellars. So onto the Cliffs of Fundy in Nova Scotia. Here it exists on the north shore of the Minas Basin. This is the area that's colored here is actually a capture of this is the boundary of the geopark. It actually now has been modified slightly after evaluation to sweep around to the new and glorious Fundy Discovery Site that the municipality of Colchester has implemented along with a lot of other help. And it's now our gateway on Highway 104 or 102, I guess, to the geopark. The area is about twice that of Discovery. It's a little more than 2,500 square kilometers. Again, it's in an unceded Mi'kmaq. Unlike Newfoundland, we have counties, and Newfoundland does not. So we have two counties that the geopark is pretty much equally represented in: Colchester on the right or the east, and Cumberland in the west. And there are 5,000 inhabitants, so we have a much lower density of population, and most of that, about 2,500 of those inhabitants are in the divert area. So I wanted to point out a feature of the geopark's geology. Now, if you're watching this and you're not a geologist, you may be kind of puzzled by all the colors. The colors represent different rock types of different ages. And we use geological maps to show so that the green in the middle are all of a certain type of rock and usually a certain age. But note that there's a line that cuts across sort of from, I guess, from northwest to, or sorry, from southwest to northeast. Oops, sensitive on the screen. This is the Cobequid Fault. I'll leave the arrow on it. The Cobequid Fault was about the size of the San Andreas Fault system of Western California today. And like the San Andreas Fault, it had motion that was mainly, rather than up and down, it was mostly motion that was going side to side. So the rocks on the south were moving in one way, the rocks north of it were moving to the right or the east. And so back at the time when this fault was active, there were violent earthquakes and volcanic eruptions and other phenomena associated with it. What was going on along this fault? Well, this is where the supercontinent Pangaea was assembling. It wasn't the only fault, because you have all of the what are called plates on the surface of the Earth carrying continents with them to assemble into one giant landmass. But this was one of the major areas along which the continents slid together. And the area to the south was accommodating North Africa, moving to the left against what was ancient North America. And so we have the collision of Africa, basically, and North America along this fault, and bringing together this supercontinent, Pangaea. And about 100, this happened around roughly, it took quite a while for this to actually happen, but say roughly around 300 million years ago, maybe a little more. But about 100 million years later, things changed, and the continent started to rip apart and move away, and Pangaea broke apart. So as Pangaea broke apart, there was a huge outpouring of lava, the greatest known in the history of the Earth, onto the Earth's surface. You've seen videos of lava outpouring onto the surface of islands in Hawaii, and how spectacular. Well, imagine that thousands-fold more than this. So the greatest outpouring ever known. That amount of lava pouring onto the surface of the Earth would have had a tremendous effect on the global climate, with the release of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases. It changed the climate, and it led to, as I mentioned previously, the fourth mass extinction in the history of life on the planet Earth, paving the way for the reign of the dinosaurs. There is nowhere on this planet where you can see so exquisitely exposed both of these events, the coming together of Pangaea and its ripping apart, exposed in brilliant seascapes, and literally textbook examples of both. So you can stand, as a colleague of mine, Reagan Maloney at the Fundy Geological Museum, pointed out once on a field trip. She's standing with her back towards Pangaea and looking across to Partridge Island to the breakup of Pangaea, all in one spot. It's quite amazing. Some of the seascapes that we have are just phenomenal. And you know, even if you're not a geologist, you go to Cape D'Or, there is no bad day to go to Cape D'Or and the Lighthouse Inn, run by Darcy Snell, and I'll get maybe a free beer when I go there next time for mentioning Darcy. No product placement required. It's amazing. So Cape D'Or is spectacular on the foggiest day, on the windiest day, on a rainy day, on a beautiful calm day, at sunset, sunrise. It is always spectacular. You must go there. Now this place on the bottom left reminds me of if Dr. Seuss had been a geologist, or maybe God, and created something, or maybe Salvador Dali, he would have come up with Clark Head. Clark Head has these amazing circular structures that look like giant doughboys of rock, all molded and transformed. It's something that geologists classify as a tectonic mélange, which doesn't mean much to non-geologists, but it's a spectacular area. And even if you do not have the luxury of going with a guide, you can just marvel at the wonders of the power of the Earth to have created these incredible shapes, which my colleague John Waldron and I have been working on, along with Georgia Pay Piper and David Piper and others, to unravel how on earth such an incredible geological phenomenon formed. And there have been others before us. So we always, as geologists, are working. It's like a relay where somebody hands a baton onto us with their interpretation, and we take it a little further, we hand it on, and somebody else takes it further still. But we're looking into how this tectonic melange could have formed, and it's a fascinating story in its own right. This is It's one of the most spectacular geological sites on Earth. This is the Old Wife. For goodness, I did not name this. The Old Wife actually is a sea stack, which is just off the photo to the right. But it's at the Old Wife that you see as you walk around from Five Islands Provincial Park. You access the beach at the picnic ground in Five Islands Provincial Park, and you walk, check with the park first to see that the tides are in your favor. This is a must, because there's a narrow tidal window here. And as you round the corner and walk up upon these rocks where Carla Skinner, former student of mine, is standing, this spectacular, jaw-dropping vista unfolds before you. Again, even if you know nothing about geology, it's beautiful, it's spectacular, and it's jaw-dropping. But what the story recorded in these rocks is quite amazing. These red rocks here, orangey, are the sediments that infilled an ancient Rift Valley, similar to those of East Africa today, in a semi-arid or arid climate as well. And this dark rock, the basalt, represents the lava flows that poured out on top of the Rift Valley. And the white line below is actually where, just like in a putting clay into a kiln today, bakes it, the lava baked the surface of the Rift Valley sediments. It's spectacular, and it tells a story of life on Earth, of the breakup of continents. The stories in these geosites, in all these geoparks, are just amazing. It's an invitation to all of you to come and see these. And if you're a geologist and haven't been to some of these places, go. If it's a favorite of yours, go again. Another favorite of mine, and this is in the Eatonville area of Cape Chignecto, and it's the Anderson's Cove lookoff. Now, my superficial geology friends know this well, because in the far distance, this flat area is actually a raised beach that formed in the times of the most recent glaciations. I won't get into the explanation of that at this time. But the wilderness view here is breathtaking as well. Again, even if you do not know the geology and the igneous rocks exposed here and how they form, it is just beautiful to ponder. It's wild, it's rugged, and it's ours. And you can go see it, even in the pandemic. Well, if you're in the Halifax area, soon, hopefully, it will be released once again. I'll end off a little mini tour of the Cliffs of Fundy with Economy Falls. This site, I reference you to, or refer you to an excellent field guide that my colleague Sandra Barr and Martha Hickman-Hild recently wrote on 48 geosites or geological sites to visit in Nova Scotia. Wonderful guide, could not be improved upon. In that guide, they tell the story of Economy Falls. So everybody loves, I think, waterfalls. I've never met a human being that did not. Economy Falls is one of those. And there's a wonderfully maintained hiking trail and quite a daunting flight of stairs down to the falls that you have to go back up afterwards. These rocks are quite amazing. They are what is called, they're a metamorphic rock called a gneiss. They existed almost 400 million years before the formation of Pangaea. And they represent the edge of a lost continent, you might say, called Avalonia, that formed, just like Pangaea would 400 million years later, it formed another supercontinent, much older, called Rodinia, that later broke up and then came together in about 300 million years ago to form Pangaea. This is amazing. This dance of the continents, the movement of the Earth's crust and the mantle below it, is a phenomenon that only became clear to geologists in the 1960s. And it explains how mountain ranges form, why earthquakes occur and where they do, why violent volcanic eruptions occur where they do. This was only understood by us as geologists in the 1960s. Before that, we had all these crazy theories and hypotheses and 50-cent names to explain things. It just shows you how young the science of geology is and how little we know of our home planet. But this is a place where you can go, put your hand on the edge of a lost continent, 734 million years ago. Just think of that. Now, I just want to take a moment to delve into an idea that is absolutely true, and I hope it maybe gives you pause to think. This is a painting by Gerald Globe, a dear friend of mine, talented Mi'kmaq artist and storyteller who works with the Confederacy of the Mainland Mi'kmaq out of Millbrook near Truro. This is a depiction of Gerald of Glooscap presenting his grandmother with an amethyst necklace on the Tombola or causeway leading to Partridge Island, a place that the Mi'kmaq call Waysock, which is heaven to them. There is much to be told of the Mi'kmaq stories of Partridge Island, but it is best to hear those told in the voice of the Mi'kmaq themselves. And I would recommend that you go search for Gerald Globe and his stories that are online, and you can listen to Gerald tell the stories of Glooscap at Partridge Island and other places. Go to the Confederacy of Mainland Mi'kmaq's website and search for stories of Glooscap and Gerald Globe. You will be, it's just remarkable. He was a guest speaker of ours at the Atlantic Geoscience Society a few years ago at our annual meeting, and many long-term respected geoscientists came up to me afterwards and said that was the best talk they'd ever heard by anybody. So, but here's my point, that the first peoples were the first geologists. They had to know the rocks to survive. They had to know which rocks could be flaked with precision into scraping tools, into knives, into spear points and arrowheads. They had to know, they knew their lives depended upon it, and their welfare and their well-being and how well they existed in concert with their neighbors. They had to know the properties of the rocks, where to find them, and to understand what the properties of the various rocks were that could be flaked to make a proper implement. And certain rocks are suited and certain rocks are not, and they clearly understood this. The first peoples, in our case the Mi'kmaq, were the first geologists, and we have much to learn from them. So this is back to my story. Do you remember me talking about Cape d'Or and the copper and the first exploration for copper by Europeans? Well, who cares? Because there's a bigger story here. And this is a new story, just unveiled about a year ago. This is a map, and I love old maps and old geological maps. This is an old geological map by Hugh Fletcher of Cape d'Or and Advocate Harbor. And inset below is Samuel de Champlain's first map of this area from 1603. And the inset on the right is native copper that occurs in the basalt rocks here. This native copper was introduced to Champlain by the Mi'kmaq. He did not discover it himself. Now, Champlain may have misunderstood what he was asking for, but the name of the place became Cap d'Or, the Cape of Gold. Well, this is not gold, this is copper. And the Mi'kmaq knew it was copper because they had used it for a very long time. And this is the story that I wanted to share with you. So this is recent research. Don't worry, you don't have to, we're not going to go through the details of this, but this came to me from Jacob Hanley and Katie Cottreau-Robbins. Jacob Hanley at St. Mary's University, where I teach part-time, and Katie Cottreau-Robbins, curator of archaeology at the Nova Scotia Museum. They undertook a groundbreaking geoarchaeology study. They investigated copper artifacts, copper headdresses, implements, and various things manufactured by the Mi'kmaq from copper. It had been long held. In fact, only, see Latanzi et al. In 2007, 2008, people for many years have assumed that all of the copper traded up and down the coast of Eastern North America and even beyond and into Central North America came from the area around Lake Michigan and Lake Superior. And this was held to be fact until Katie and Jacob came along and they analyzed various artifacts. And lo and behold, they found that the Cape D'Or copper has a very, very distinctive geochemical signature that stands out from any other. So it's like a fingerprint when you analyze it. So they found that Cape D'Or copper can be picked out and identified in these artifacts. So what they found was that artifacts that had been made by the Mi'kmaq before any Europeans set foot here came from Cape D'Or. So what does that mean? Just think of it. It means that the Mi'kmaq had been mining copper, obtaining copper from the cliffs at Cape D'Or for at least 500 years and maybe millennia before the arrival of Europeans. And they've been using this copper to fashion all sorts of magnificent accoutrements to their clothing, ceremonial headdresses, and other practical implements. It's really astounding. It changes our whole impression of the way that the indigenous people interacted, and particularly our Mi'kmaq, and how ingenious they were, and that they were trading people that had sway in Eastern North America in a very, very prominent way. So we are getting to the end here. So I wanted to just share with you some gaps to fill in our geoparks. You look at the map of Canada, and there's some obvious gaps. First of all, we want an Indigenous-led geopark. I would like to see a wholly Indigenous-led geopark. The first geopark north of 60 in the territories, and more geoparks in the west. Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, even Western Ontario. So how can you help? How can you help? What can you do? Well, first of all, visit your local geopark. Even in the winter, we are Canadians, right? See on that photograph, this is beautiful from Tumbler Ridge. We actually snowshoed up to the top of that rock on the left. So it can be done, even by old fogies like me. What else can we do? Well, tell your friends and share it on social media. Get the word out. Eat local, camp local, spend locally. Always should be locally. Nod to my mother, who was a grammar nerd. Students and profs, your research in the geopark helps their revalidation with UNESCO. So make sure if you're doing research or you're looking for a place to do research, think about it in a geopark because it will help them. For geologists, geoscientists, offer your services on committees, even as a geological guide. For those of you who are not geologists, but know something about the land and the culture and the history, offer your services, or just because you feel like this is a good thing. So we're looking forward to 2021, aren't we? And to get out there and explore our geoparks. So away you go and enjoy. Thank you.
Thanks very much, John. That was a fantastic presentation.
I'm sorry that I took longer than I thought I was going to, because I thought I had lots of time and I filled it in. So apologies there.
Also, just want to say a special thanks to David Lenz, who's actually our current AGS president, for hosting the entire Zoom meeting and helping control all the muting and the recording. And also thanks to the rest of the Traveling Speaker Series committee. So not just myself and Matt, but also Katrina Russell and Sheila Waters helped put this all together. So I guess maybe Matt, do you want to start with the first question? I think we have a couple of comments in the chat. Did you want to read out the question, Matt? I can't see anybody.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay,